Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is Daily Drop number 155. Jes Staley is finished, folks. The writing is on the wall. He might not actually have been shown the door yet, but the writing is on the wall for Mr. Staley, and the party is certainly over. Now, originally, Barclays said that they had a time frame of replacing him by 2021. Well, we know that's been accelerated at this point, considering he's under assault from every single angle. Never mind the people from outside of the company that are on the warpath trying to get rid of him. He has to worry about people in his own boardroom acting this way. You know, you have the activist investor Edward Bramson, who is just going absolutely insane right now trying to get rid of Mr. Staley, and it's having a big time effect. And you see that in this new Wall Street Journal article that came out a couple of days ago. And in this article, it's going into the whole entire story about the investigators who are examining Mr. Staley's visits with Jeffrey Epstein on the island. And what you notice is you'll see the articles ramp up as these CEOs are on the way out. We saw the same exact thing occur with Les Wexner, and I brought it to your attention when it first started, and we covered it throughout the whole entire thing until he finally stepped down. And once you start hearing these whispers on Wall Street, and once you start hearing about this from insiders on Wall Street, you know that the writing is on the wall, because at the end of the day, these people that are in these positions as CEOs, big-time chiefs at these banks, they're never far away from being let go. All it takes is a big dip in profits or in earnings, and see you later. So you add that onto the face of what Staley is being accused of and looked at more closely because of, and you see that this is not a good situation for Jes Staley. And I previously said about 8 months I thought he would be out. That was the time frame, but I've scaled that back even. 4 to 6 months, I think, is the longest we'll see Staley in this position. And we can even see that accelerate considering what's going on with COVID-19 and that giving Barclays a legitimate out here. So Staley is definitely deserves everything that's coming his way. You know, he didn't only have a friendship with Epstein and a partner, a business relationship with Epstein, but he visited Epstein after the fact. After Epstein had already been convicted of the crimes he was convicted of, Staley still had a relationship with this guy. So again, we've said it millions of times here on the podcast, previous to the conviction, you can at least make the argument that, well, I didn't know what the hell he was up to. At least you can make that argument, and okay, probably still not going to listen to you at this point, but that argument can at least be made. There is no argument for hanging out with a convicted sex offender. There is zero argument. There's no reason for you to be hanging out with this guy who has been convicted of what he was convicted of. And not only that, but all of the other women and girls who came forward, and you're still hanging out with this guy. It's unacceptable for a man in the position of Staley, and there has to be repercussions. And folks, it looks like it's coming, and it will not be long, in my opinion. I think that Staley is in big trouble here. I don't think that he has any sort of high ground to stand upon to defend himself, and I believe enemies are closing in from all sides, and a boardroom can be a very, very vicious place. So, let's jump into the article. This article is originally done by the Wall Street Journal, but it's posted here on marketscreener.com, and it's not behind the paywall. So I'll post it in the description box so all of you can check it out. This article was written by Anna Isaac, David Benoit, and Simon Clark. UK investigators are examining visits by Barclays PLC chief executive Jes Staley to Jeffrey Epstein's private Caribbean island as part of a probe into whether Mr. Staley told the truth about his association with the convicted sex offender. You know he didn't tell the truth. You know he didn't tell the whole entire truth. Oh, well, he gave us emails. Yeah, the emails he wanted you to see. What about the emails that you didn't see? What about the more private emails that him and Jeffrey Epstein might have been sending to each other? Did you have all of those? Did you have somebody go in and check the servers, check all of the devices? How do you know that you got all of the emails? Simple, they do not know. In a statement, a Barclays spokesman said Mr. Staley visited the island, Little St. James, twice, both times with his wife. Neither the bank nor Mr. Staley had previously acknowledged the visits publicly. We all knew that. We've heard that from several sources. We've heard it from people who have corroborated the fact that Staley was there, and we've heard it from market insiders. This wasn't something that was just made up. You don't just make things up like this about a powerful man like Staley unless you have some teeth behind it, right? This is a whole entire operation by Staley to try and cover up his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. It's very obvious what's going on here, and it's very obvious that Barclays knew what was going on from the beginning too. Let's not let them get off the hook either. Barclays as an institution is full of scumbaggery. Investigators are comparing disclosures Mr. Staley made to Barclays, and which the bank subsequently made to UK financial regulators, with a trove of emails and other documents handed over by Mr. Staley's former employer, JP Morgan Chase & Company, according to people familiar with the investigation. Well, that's good, right? That JP Morgan's cooperating, but they don't want egg on their face either. Can we really trust JP Morgan to send all of the emails over? What did they burn in the burn room? What did they stick into the shredder? What did they get rid of with bleach bit? I don't trust any of these financial institutions. They're right up there with the Department of Justice, even more so as scumbags, these banksters. Mr. Staley said his relationship with Mr. Epstein was professional and began in 2000 when he was head of JP Morgan's private bank, and the financier, pedophile, was a client. He told journalists on February 13 that his interactions with Mr. Epstein began to taper off after he left JP Morgan in 2013, and the last time he had contact with him was in the middle to fall of 2015. He became Barclays CEO in December 2015. Right there you have it, folks. After the 2008 arrest, they were still in business together. JP Morgan had no problem still doing business with Jeffrey Epstein. They had zero problem still laundering his money, probably. I have no evidence of that, but you know how I feel about these people and the money laundering. I know how they operate. One thing I definitely know about is how things work on Wall Street. Okay? And I know what these people are up to, and I know what their motivations are. And when you start dealing with these sort of people, these kind of power brokers on Wall Street, you're dealing with a whole different breed of scum. Mr. Staley visited Little St. James twice, accompanied by his wife on both visits, a Barclays spokesman told the Wall Street Journal. The visits to Little St. James and his meetings at the Manhattan address where Epstein maintained an office were disclosed to the board. Look, they have to add the part, he brought his wife, as if that means anything. Look at Glenn and Eva Dubin. So his wife is supposed to be his alibi, his excuse, his armor, just like Prince Andrew's daughters were supposed to be his alibi on the night that he was at Tramp with Virginia Roberts. These people are sick, folks. These are the people that want to lord over you. These are the oligarchs that are in charge of everything. These are the corrupt, disgusting bankers that keep us in a form of modern-day slavery with their ridiculous high finance rates and their foreclosures and their absolute and utter raiding of the wealth of the people of the world. And they're just gross all around people. They just skeeve me out. The UK's Financial Conduct Authority and Prudential Regulation Authority are examining Mr. Staley's characterization to the company of his relationship with Mr. Epstein and the subsequent description of that relationship in the company's response to the FCA, Barclays said in a February 13th statement. At that time, Barclays' board said Mr. Staley had been sufficiently transparent about the nature and extent of his relationship with Mr. Epstein. And like I told you folks, well, that's not what they're saying. That's not what they're saying on Wall Street. That's not what they're saying in the financial circles. The rumors are that Staley was not transparent. You see the words that they use here, sufficiently transparent. What does that even mean? That's pretty vague, right? So what they're trying to do is, CYA, baby, cover your ass. And that's what Barclays is trying to do here. They should have never hired Staley in the first place. Staley should have been a persona non grata with his relationship with Epstein. But like we've talked about several times, they don't care. High society on Wall Street, high society in New York does not care about past transgressions if they feel like you're a vehicle that can move them forward, or if you're somebody that can donate to one of their dumbass charities. The FCA, the UK's financial watchdog, determines whether executives are fit and proper to lead. Mr. Epstein pleaded guilty in 2008 to prostitution counts in Florida. This year, prosecutors in the U.S. Virgin Islands, of which Little St. James is part, alleged Mr. Epstein abused hundreds of young women and girls until 2018. The prosecutors said that for nearly 2 decades, Mr. Epstein brought girls as young as 11 to his secluded property on Little St. James. And this is the guy that Jes Staley is hanging around. This is the guy that's in charge of the whole shebang over in Barclays. This is the guy that thinks it's a good idea that you have a 24% finance rate on your credit card. This is the guy who also thinks it's a good idea that you have a 19.9% on your car payment finance rate, while at the same time hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein and Lord knows what other sick, disgusting perv on this island. Mr. Staley had a large sailboat custom designed, which he and his family have regularly taken to the Caribbean. He once took the boat to Mr. Epstein's island, Bloomberg has reported. Just the one time, though, right? Just the one time. Just like Dershowitz was only in New Mexico at Zorro Ranch one time, and it was only for an hour, but his wife and his kid was with him. So, you know, it's always the same stories with these people. It's like they sit around and they laugh at us as they're drinking their $5,000 bottle of wine, coming up with their public excuse. Sherborne Investors, which owns more than 5% of Barclays, said on March 2nd that Mr. Staley should step down because of his links to Mr. Epstein. We believe that it would be in everyone's interest to draw a line under this destabilizing situation, which has become a circus, as soon as possible, Sherborne said. And remember, Sherborne is the group that's been trying to get Staley out for a while now. They have never liked the fact that he has this connection to Epstein and that it's affecting their dough. They don't want anything to do with it. And the way that they're going hard against him in the boardroom as these investigations are going on from the exterior sources, I'm telling you right now, he is in big trouble. Some Barclays employees have expressed concerns to the regulators about the truthfulness of disclosures made by Mr. Staley to the bank, made by Mr. Staley and the bank, according to people familiar with the FCA probe. That's exactly what I've been telling you folks, isn't it? Isn't that exactly what I said? That there is a lot of angst and anxiety amongst people that work for Barclays and people in the financial sector in general when it comes to this story, because there is a lot of BS going on here, all right? I'll just call it what it is. Mr. Staley has not been very truthful, according to the people I've talked to, according to this report even. I deeply regret having had any relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, Mr. Staley told journalists in February. He said the investigation was focused on his transparency and openness with the bank, and that he had been very transparent. Let's be clear. Just like the rest of them, he doesn't regret his relationship with Epstein. He regrets that relationship was outed and that you know about it. That's what he regrets. What he regrets is that people like me or you are on the airplane, like the story I was telling you, and the paper comes around to get, a great deal. 60,000, flight miles, etc., etc., but the partner is Barclays. Now, since Jes Staley is in charge of Barclays and they have ties to Epstein, people like you and I would take one look at that paper and rip it up. Because why would we want to give our money to somebody like this? And that's what Sherborne is saying. Sherborne is saying that this is a bunch of BS, that there's people out there losing a significant share of the market and a significant share of money from people who don't want to do business with a man like Staley. On February 25th, Mr. Staley told colleagues that he was confident he would remain in his position and he is going nowhere. Yeah, that's not correct. Some people who have worked with Mr. Staley for years, including some who consider him a friend, have questioned his judgment in a series of missteps. Again, that's the prevailing thought and prevailing talk on Wall Street with the insiders right now. They definitely don't trust Staley. They know that Staley isn't the right guy to continue to be the one to be at the helm of the ship, and they know that sooner rather than later is better for Barclays. In 2018, Mr. Staley was fined for attempting to unmask a whistleblower, which UK regulators called a serious error of judgment. U.S. authorities fined him over the episode. He apologized to the board after the incident. You know, I don't call it a serious error of judgment anymore. This is just a personality trait with him. He doesn't believe the law applies to him, just like the rest of them. The whole entire group of these people that we discuss on a regular basis on the podcast and other content creators talk about, and you see in the news articles, all of these billionaires, the who's club, none of these people, they don't have errors in judgment. This is just the way they are. This is their character. He also waded into a messy dispute between KKR and Company and his wife's brother, causing the U.S. private equity giant to pull business from the bank. People he spoke to at the time said he told them he hadn't been acting in his capacity as CEO of the bank, but rather as a family member. Yeah, okay. He was trying to bully them, trying to put pressure on them in typical Staley fashion, acting like a bully, acting like the biggest alpha in the room, and again, ended up hurting the bank, ended up hurting the shareholders, and still he's sitting on this board? So, look, the time is nigh, folks. Sherborne from the inside, the regulators from the outside, and then you add in all the pressure from the people following the Epstein case at this point. It is not looking good for Mr. Staley. He better get his resume prepared because the time is coming, and it is coming soon, folks. Mr. Staley is in big trouble here, talking about professionally speaking, and there's no life preserver being thrown out to him. There's nobody that's going to come to his rescue. You know, the board even, like I said, they publicly came out and said, oh, yeah, you know, we're not too concerned with Mr. Staley. We support him, blah, 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 blah. But behind closed doors, there is a completely different sentiment. All right, everybody, if you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. Also, if you enjoy my work and you like the content and you want to help the podcast continue to grow, you can do that by clicking on the GoFundMe link inside of the description box. I will be back tomorrow morning with the morning update and the usual daily drop. Enjoy your Saturday night, everybody.